And welcome to another edition of House to Home. You know, there are things that are very special, and today's show is one of them. Over the last 20 years, House to Home has been bringing all about education and involving and knowledge. And Isaiah from the Spokane Home Builders is here to join me. And I want to say that thank you to Avista as being a big supporter of House to Home and the Spokane Home Builders. So with that being said, Isaiah, we've got a real interesting subject that we've been thinking.
Yeah.
You need to know more about it.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
lead us on.
Yeah, great. So different from our normal program, but
Right.
we really wanted to bring some experts in the field to you to talk about really how energy efficiency is being treated. We recently had on February 1st was passed was put into place, implemented the 2018 building codes. This is something that goes on every 3 years, and really these energy codes in particular are marching towards this goal in 2030 of reducing carbon emissions and increasing energy efficiency. Particularly this year, though, is kind of a turning point, an inflection point, where we're seeing $20,000 to $30,000 in the cost of a home being added in order to comply with these codes. And so we thought it was really important to talk to the public about why this is, what this means. We know that roughly for every $1,000 in cost tied to a home, 221 families are priced out of being able to afford a home. This puts pressure on the resale market. It puts pressure on the rental market. Really makes it a lot more difficult for people to have housing security, for people to own a home. And we really think that's a high value. We think consumer choice is of value. We think home ownership brings a whole lot of benefits to people, including being able to generate wealth. And so we think that's a really important conversation to have. Is this cost really worth it? What are consumers being forced to pay for, and what choices then are eliminated? And so this time we want to give you a chance to meet our panel and let them introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Corey Condren with Condren Homes.
I'm Tom Linhart, Chief Energy Efficiency Engineer at Avista Utilities.
I'm Danica Hansen. I'm with Ryan Built Homes.
I'm Colin Sprigg, Senior Director of Government Relations for Avista Corporation.
And I'm Ben McGurty with Hayden Homes.
So welcome to the Energy Code Impact Summit. We have a builders panel for you. And so we're going to jump into that, asking some questions here of our builders.
Corey, I wanted to ask you a couple questions here. What has increase in cost meant for you in your business as a custom home builder, and what factors drive that? Are consumers asking for these energy changes?
Yeah, good question, Clyde. It's an industry-wide problem. It's just not my company. It's not Danica's or Ben's company. It's an industry-wide company problem, and it's the cost that's putting on the top of new homes, on new home prices. It only puts pressure on the entire housing market, whether it be condos, resale and condo, values go up, and then here come the rental prices go up along with it. So it's putting tremendous pressure on the entire industry, and the people aren't, me anyways, they're not asking me for all this energy efficiency. They're asking for sensible energy efficiency, meaning how's this going to save me money down the road? How's my investment? How am I going to capture my investment with reducing my energy costs to live in my home? If that doesn't make sense to the buyer, the consumer, they're not going to do it. We've never put solar panels on the roof of a home because when we investigate it, you never capture your money. And so they're making smart choices. They're making educational choices based on the economics of their lives and running their home for the life of the home. So no, they're not asking for these sorts of energy code driven items that we're getting pushed on right now.
Danica Hansen with Ryan Built Homes. Most people seem relatively unaware of how drastically the building code changes have affected the market. What are you hearing from others in the industry, and what kind of demographic shifts are you seeing in buyers?
I think that's exactly what is taking place. There's definitely an educational gap going on with people being unaware of what's happening with regards to the energy codes, which is fascinating to me because the overall demographic for home buyers has dramatically shifted over recent years. They're becoming more increasingly aware, educated, more knowledgeable. And they also have an abundance amount of information right at their fingertips that they've never had in history. And yet the home buyers still and their agent representing them are equally in the dark when it comes to these energy codes and the impacts it's going to have on purchasing a home. And while it's fascinating, it's really not that surprising that this is taking place. The state has done little to provide educational opportunities to the general public. This has not been covered in the media whatsoever. So how would they know unless they're actively seeking out this information and knowledge specifically to energy codes? Or, of course, unless we, the builders, are supplying that for them. And that's a really difficult task for us to take on as the home builder, because we're constantly weighing the need to educate and be transparent with not wanting to overwhelm our home buyers. And I had a really good example of this in late January. We halted our sales because we knew we weren't going to be able to get the permits in time for that February 1st implementation date. And we didn't want to sell a product that we knew we couldn't deliver on. And of course, that day I had a buyer's agent contact me, and she was frantic because she couldn't find the listing that her client wanted on the MLS any longer. And I started my conversation with her by asking, what do you know about the energy codes that go into effect next week? And her response was, what energy codes? And this is, again, the buyer's agent, not the buyer themselves. So this is already an intense and highly competitive market, and she's naturally frustrated with the situation, and it's the first time she's hearing anything about energy codes. And so I started my conversation with her by explaining the cliff notes of what the energy codes entailed and how it's going to impact our business model as well as all builders in Washington, and the product that we're going to be able to produce for her client. And this is just one example of dozens where this is going to continue to happen. We're only a couple weeks into this, and this is going to continue more and more, where we experience these buyers who are highly educated but completely thrown a curveball when it comes to the energy codes. They're in this intensely competitive market, limited housing, and now we're tacking on energy codes and a completely different product standard. And oh, by the way, it's going to cost you a lot more money to purchase this house. And so they're naturally thrown off guard. They're increasingly more frustrated, they're overwhelmed, and it's just charging this already frenzied market.
Next, Tom Leinhart, for you, there are two things that I know that you've kept tabs on that have happened recently in Spokane. Certainly these energy codes that were passed in 2018 that took effect February 1st of this year. But we also recently saw a severe weather event that resulted in the loss of service for many people and families in Spokane. So what changes to the code? What do changes to the code mean for consumers in terms of their utility? And then secondarily, what lessons do we need to take away from events like the downage last month?
Well, thank you, Isaiah. For Danica's point was educating customers. And to your question, the codes are doing a couple things that have never been done before. One part of the codes is you can't put a natural gas device in that has a standing pilot anymore. And so when we lose electrical power, if the device doesn't have a standing pilot, there is no way for it to get started up unless you put some electrical power in and get it going. And so while it's a great idea to not have a standing pilot, because even we believe those are maybe a little bit wasteful, what we really need to do, though, is along with the code is to say, here's how you get around that. Here's the steps you take so that you can still fire up your gas fireplace even when there's no electricity. In my home, and I'm really lucky to have had a new home built, I put in a battery backup system to my fireplace so that I can fire it up no matter what. I don't have to have electricity to do that. But to Danica's point, we haven't done the education that goes along with the changes in the code that makes that happen. The other thing that's happened locally that has to do with the codes is the fact that we have had very cold weather. Not just here, but all across the state and all across the country. I mean, it's presently 10 degrees in Houston, Texas. I mean, it's amazing what's happening. Because of that, we are seeing that some of our systems aren't operating the way we had hoped that they would operate. And I think that that's a case where we need to work as close as we can with the code officials to talk to them about, can you look at different climate zones slightly differently so that we can make sure that we're taking care of these things properly in the codes. So those are the things that I think that have happened recently that let us, from a technical standpoint, try to jump in and see if we can educate and or bring customers to the place they need to be.
Thank you, Tom. Again, Avista has been very involved with this, and this is nothing new for them. They've been studying it very, very hard. Ben McGarity with Hayden Homes, I have a question for you. You are the medium price area of the home builders. We can almost see that there's about a 15% cost increase due to the code that is being put into place at this time. And this actually adds another $20,000 to $30,000 in cost to the consumer. What is the driving cost, and what effect is this having on your buyers?
Thank you, Clyde. There's a little bit of a misnomer when it comes to cost. A lot of people believe that $1 of cost equates to $1 of purchase price increase, when in reality, $1 of cost to a builder equates to about $2.50 of cost increase to a home buyer. The main reason for this is that there's fees associated with these costs. There's costs to redesign all your plans to accommodate all these new energy features. There's finance and carrying costs. There's commission increases. There's tile insurance, etc. So a $10,000 bill or cost to a builder can easily be $25,000 to a home buyer. In the case of the Washington State Energy Code, the $25,000 increase is state mandated. It's being determined by the state, despite what the homeowners want. They could find more perceived value in some other options, but they're not allowed to choose those options. That choice is being taken away from them by the increased cost of the energy code. So instead of getting that RV garage or upgraded kitchen, now you're forced to purchase a home that has features in it that the state has mandated as energy efficient. So not only are home buyers having to choose different options, worst case scenario, they're priced out of the market altogether. As Isaiah stated, just a couple of $1,000 prices out a ton of people from the market, and that is exactly what we're seeing right now.
Thanks, Ben. The next question is for Collins. From an energy standpoint, we're seeing a massive shift in what energy sources are allowed by Washington State. In fact, House Bill 1084 actually bans the use of natural gas in the future. This passed out of committee recently in Olympia and might be up for a floor vote. So what's driving this shift? And will these sorts of measures actually accomplish their intended goal?
Thank you, Isaiah, for the question. What is driving the change in the building code, as we've been talking about here today? And what drives House Bill 1084 is climate change policy. Back in 2008, the Washington State Legislature passed a bill that establishes greenhouse gas emission reduction goals for the state. The goal that was established by 2050 is that we would reduce emissions across our economy by 50% by 2050. There were no policies in place to reach that goal. So by 2009, the legislature decided, well, what we should do is to put into statute a requirement that the Building Code Council, which establishes the building code we've been talking about, would have to adopt increasingly more stringent building codes to achieve net zero fossil fuel greenhouse gas emission building codes by 2031. So that's that in part is what's really driving a lot of this discussion. The Building Code Council was also directed, by the way, to start inserting measures in the building code to acquire accommodation for electric vehicle charging in residential commercial buildings. So you go forward into last year, 2020, the legislature adopted what was probably the most significant greenhouse gas emission reduction requirement that it ever had up until that point. And what it did is the legislature took our 2008 greenhouse gas reduction emission goals and made them the most stringent in the country, such that economy-wide, so we're talking about the fuels to heat your house, to the fuel that goes in your vehicle, to the fuels that are used in industry, have to be reduced by 95% below 1990 levels by 2050. So there are those who believe that in order to achieve that goal, you've got to eliminate the use of fossil fuels in virtually all of our economy. And that includes using fossil fuels to, cook your food, to heat your house, to heat your commercial space, to fire your fireplace, or what have you. So that is what is really driving a lot of what we're seeing, what we're talking about here today. And that is what's behind House Bill 1084, which is currently before the Washington State Legislature, and would by 2050 virtually eliminate the use of natural gas in commercial and residential buildings. And I just want to note that this policy is unique in that up until this point, when you look at jurisdictions like California that have adopted greenhouse gas emission reduction policy, those are policies that don't hit customers directly. A cap and trade regulation, a building code, low carbon fuel standard, what have you. Those are prices that get hidden from the customer until they actually pay for it. They don't actually know why they're paying a higher price, but they are. This bill will be the first time that a customer will actually see money having to come out of their pocket to pay for something. What would they have to pay for? Well, under this legislation, a residential homeowner would have to change out their gas appliances, their stove, their fireplace, and their furnace, and replace them with electric heating and electric heat pumps, which in this climate don't work very well, as we've talked about here. So if that were to become law, for the first time, customers would actually be told, write a check, schedule some contractors to come into your house because you have to replace your appliances and your furnace and so forth. So that's all for the reason and purpose for reducing greenhouse gas emissions and trying to affect climate change.
Thank you, Colin. That is so a lot of information there, folks. Corey, I have another question for you. Originally, the building codes were created to keep people safe and to save energy and to keep the costs down with efficient equipment. Now, however, the energy code is driving up costs and moving the estimated carbon emissions. How is energy efficiency and carbon emission reduction different? What does it mean for the consumer?
Another great question, Clyde. So referring back to my previous answer, I look at energy efficiency as, in my definition, is the new homeowner want to save money overall operating costs on their home, where carbon emissions is the climate change model, the climate change subject, get rid of greenhouse gases. But check me if I'm wrong here, Tom, guys from Avista. So I don't think we can dam any more waters. I don't think we can create enough wind and solar to fill the gap of this increased energy usage. So how are we going to create more electricity for this higher demand? We've got to be burning fossil fuels, I believe, to create more energy. So, energy efficiency is conserving energy. Mainly when it comes down to that individual person is saving some money on their pocketbook. The carbon emissions model that we're heading to is just skyrocketing costs in the effort, like you said, Colin, in the effort to curb climate change. And I don't think this isn't the right way to get there. I'm talking layman's terms here. I don't see how we're going to produce more energy and keep our greenhouse gases down by creating more electricity. When the endpoint user of using natural gas is a very efficient way of operating your home, whether it be, like you alluded to earlier, cooking and heating and barbecues, whatever that might be. So, yeah, I don't think it's going to happen, but I'd like to turn the wagon around and start talking about energy efficiency. I think that has more dramatic impact on the climate than this carbon output model just hasn't been thought all the way through.
Great, thank you, Corey. Danica, at Ryan Bill, a big part of your model is giving consumers personalized options in their new home. And like all significant financial decisions, these choices are driven by a cost-benefit calculation. When it comes to natural gas versus electrification, are consumers choosing to spend more for all-electric energy? And what will happen to buyers when they no longer have that choice?
Thank you. That's a good question. You are exactly right. While we are a production builder, we do focus on personalization in our model. And for those that may not know what production building is, it's volume with efficiency. And the only way we can do that successfully is by limiting the amount of options that we offer. And for us specifically, that's structural. But we do allow our buyers a huge amount of personalization with our Buyer's Choice program. And in that program, we give them numerous options on design elements from the design center, like cabinets and faucets and colors and all these finishes and so forth. And that really puts that cost benefit analysis right back into the consumer's hands. We also encourage them to review all of these options extensively before they actually have their meeting, along with their pricing worksheet. So that way they can assess and weigh what their wish list items are versus what the reality of their budget is. And as far as gas versus electric, our electric range is a perfect example of this. We offer an electric range for an upgrade, and overwhelmingly we hear from our clients, oh no, I'd prefer the gas actually. So they opt to stay with our standard appliance package, which is gas, instead of utilizing, or they utilize the money that they could have spent on an electric range towards an upgraded appliance package, again, that features that gas. So again, it's in the data. Just in the last year, we had 8 clients who selected an electric range option. That's 8 clients out of roughly 350 meetings that took place. So we have 2% of our buyers that are actively selecting an electric option over gas. So that really says a lot. I've been with a company for 6 years now. I've never once had a client go, hey, can you put in an electric furnace instead of that gas one that you do standard? And as far as solar is concerned, we've only had a couple of clients who have inquired about this. And when we explain to them, I'm so sorry, that's not an option that we actually offer, they're totally fine with installing them after they close on their home. It's not a make or break decision-making factor when they're weighing building with us. So at least for us specifically, our clients are definitely more geared towards wanting gas options in their home. So it'll be really interesting when we strip away that freedom of choice from them, and they no longer can have those items in there. Right now, we still have communities that are lined with gas, so we can still offer those ranges and those fireplaces, but as that slowly diminishes, it's going to be really interesting to see the reaction of our consumers. And for me personally, it's becoming more and more difficult to find effective ways to communicate what's going on to our consumers and market to them, because I personally would not want to buy a home that didn't have gas in it. We were one of the unfortunate ones who had significant damage to our home in the windstorm last month, and we were out of power for multiple days on end. And with a 1-year-old in the house, that is not ideal. But we were able to warm up by our gas fireplace. We were able to still take a hot shower and make it to work the next day. And we were able to cook a hot meal over our gas range. And I don't know if that would have been possible. In fact, I know it wouldn't have if our home was only electric based. So it's really going to be interesting for today's consumer as this whole shift takes place. And I think all of us builders can agree that we're going to start seeing a more disappointed home buyer right out the gate, and they're going to be disappointed with us. And I think we all can agree that that's not the buying experience that we want our buyers to have. We want them to have a positive and engaging building experience with us. But when we tell them, I'm sorry, you can't have the items that you want in your home, and oh, by the way, again, that's at a higher cost, it's going to be a really difficult task for us to overcome.
Danica, thank you. You really brought it home, and I will say that physically. You brought it home to the actual last couple weeks. Tom, I really have some real serious questions here for you, but you've already touched on a few of them already because you have the knowledge right there at the fingertips. There are two distinguishing current regulations seems to be inadequately addressed. One is the difference between what works in the climate of Seattle versus the east side of the state, and the other is evaluation of the carbon versus source carbon. What inefficiencies, inadequacies are you seeing as a result of this happening?
Thanks, Clyde. I think one of the things that I do want to bring up is that when we look at what we're looking at, if we want to educate all of our customers, we have to start educating on everything to do with carbon, everything to do with the reason why the codes are changing and why they're changing. And so one of the issues that I personally have technically with the codes is that there's a confusion over whether you're talking carbon on site or carbon from the source. And so I want everybody to train themselves up to understand why it might be hard for us as Avista to cover a hot water tank that used to be gas that's now been made into an electric at 5 o'clock in the morning on December 20th, because now I've got to fire a single cycle turbine up just to make that electric work, when before that wasn't the case. What it is the difference between site, what's happening on your site, and what's happening at the source to make that. And so I don't believe that it's my place to tell you what those should be, but I think it's everybody's place to understand they have a responsibility to learn that those two things are different. The other part of your question, which really plays into our role in these codes, is that there's a prescriptive method that you can get through the codes. So the new ones that are just here the 1st of February give you a prescriptive amount of points for each thing that you want to do. But they don't take away points if you want to have a heat pump, a high quality heat pump that gives you a certain number of points, but back that up with natural gas. But our customers don't understand that that can be a case that you can use and still be able to get the points for the electric heat pump, but have something there in case you have or some problem happens later. So part of what we need to do as Avista, you guys as builders, is talk to our customers and say, let's lay out all of these options. And when you look at the codes, those options are little things like envelope. How much insulation do we put on? Infiltration. How tight do we make the house? Do we make it so tight that we have to put in a air-to-air heat exchanger so that we can even bring in enough air so you can breathe? Or do we make it just tight enough to where you can live in it? And these are all parts of the code, and since we haven't taught everybody what's coming in the code, these are things that people are going to have to be trained on so that they understand, okay, yeah, I do want a backup natural gas furnace. Yeah, I'll put in a heat pump, because what we're looking at in the future is actually we're starting to work on a research project right now at the Scott Morris Innovation Center, where we're looking at our customers who have heat pumps, but they also have a natural gas furnace. And to lower carbon in the future, we might be able to tell them, listen, we got a lot of wind on right now. Would you bring your heat pump on to heat with? Or, sorry, we're at a peak. Would you mind using your furnace, because it's going to be way lower carbon than us building electricity at this time? And so part of what we're trying to do is work at the grid level to say, we can give you clues how to make that lower carbon, but you're going to have all of the opportunities in place for us to do that. You can't take away gas and still be able to use that technique as we go down. And at Avista, we'd really like to see our gas infrastructure stay, just so that we have the ability to use renewable natural gas in the future and cause it to be of value to people as well. So all of these things are reasons why we're concerned about the climate differences and all the things in the code.
Yeah, thank you, Tom. There are definitely more and better solutions that we want to be able to bring to the table. Thank you for mentioning some of those. Ben McGurdy, the next question is for you. Right now, the median income in Spokane is roughly $52,000, which translates to being able to afford a home somewhere in the range of $250,000 to $270,000. However, we know that the median new construction price is actually at $400,000. So what needs to happen to bridge this gap and make homes attainable for Spokane families?
Thank you, Isaiah. We were faced with the housing shortage coming out of the downturn. As a country, we were $7 million behind supply by the time we came out of it. We've never been able to recover that. And add that to the COVID restrictions, not being able to build houses for 45 to 60 to 90 days, on top of the inefficiencies that have been created by this pandemic. We just don't have the ability to catch up. Spokane County has about 10-day supply of houses right now. And we need to make sure that we're putting the efforts and working together to add to that supply, to build faster, to figure out how to work together, work with the municipalities to focus on efficiencies and building faster so we can crawl out of this. We also need to push back on Olympia as they go to implement all these restrictions that make it harder and more expensive for homeowners to purchase houses.
Ben, I appreciate that, because Hayden Homes is heavily involved and production is the most important thing. With that being said, Colin, with Avista, what is the long-term effect on utility costs as we consider the zero carbon goal in Washington State?
Well, to meet that goal, you have to consider the implications of public policy on the electrical system and our natural gas system that we've been talking about here today. But beginning with electricity, Washington State already has a law called the Clean Energy Transformation Act that requires Avista as an electric utility to serve our customers with 100% clean renewable energy by 2045. And we don't have to use just renewable energy to do that. We can use and invest more into energy efficiency. We can invest in technologies that allow us, an electric utility, to control somebody's thermostat or their water heater. Remains to be seen how consumers would feel about that, but that's what the law envisions we would be able to do to control peak loads and so forth. And it also envisions that we would seek out perhaps on-site generation. Corey was talking earlier about solar energy and its values or its costs or its relevance in this market in particular. That's something that would be expected of us to look into. But the ultimate result of that is if we're going to do that, we're going to have to build far more generation we do not have today. We have to take natural gas generation out of our system. We have to take coal-fired generation out of our system and find areas to build more wind generation and solar and so forth. Well, that requires big build-outs of the transmission system. Well, we all know it's pretty difficult to build out a transmission system. Not everybody wants one of those in their backyards or through their development, I bet. And as a result, I think what that may require happening is if we're not able to deliver the energy we're producing from other regions, then it's going to force the market towards on-site generation. Again, as we talked about earlier, solar panels on roofs. And that does not come with a lot of efficiency. It has some operational considerations that we have to deal with as an electric utility too. But in some respects, customers, are paying twice for the same energy supply. They will still need us when the sun isn't shining, right? Yet they'll have solar panels that they will have paid for as well. Not to say that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's going to have a cost to it. And I think that's kind of where the future is driving us on the electric utility side. Now on the gas side, there's a couple of options that are available to us if the goal is to meet some greenhouse gas emission reduction requirements. There's this notion of decarbonization, which is where we can diversify our fuel source away from what's referred to as fossil natural gas that comes out of the ground, with renewable natural gas, such as methane that comes off of landfills, or even hydrogen sometime in the future, to diversify that fuel to reduce its emissions. And we want to be able to do that in a cost-effective way so that we're doing what's good for the environment and what's good for the customer. And it takes advantage of a built-out infrastructure that our customers have been paying for a long time and truly, truly value, I believe. The option of that is electrification, which is what House Bill 1084 is all about. We talked about that a little bit earlier, which would eliminate the use of natural gas and require electrification of all segments of our economy, in particular our gas utility system. And that will have tremendous costs, not just to those who build houses or what have you, and customers who otherwise might have preferred natural gas, but it's going to raise the electricity prices for everybody else, because the effect of that would be, once customers start converting their gas-heated homes, for example, to electricity, that increases the amount of electricity we have to produce as an electric utility. It's been estimated that if all of our natural gas customers converted to electricity, that our peak load on our electric system would almost double. So you talk about the need to build out transmission, to build more generation, to build out the capacity of the distribution system too. When you have to put that in the context, neighborhoods that are heated with gas right now, the electric system is served just as size just to meet their electric load. Well, if you increase their electric load by installing or electric furnaces, you have to increase the capacity of the distribution system to deliver the power to serve those electric appliances. So it's going to have costs for electric customers as well, because not all those costs are going to be borne by that neighborhood I talked about. It's going to be borne by all of our electric customers. So climate change policy is driving a lot of things in a lot of directions. The end result will be higher costs for consumers, whether it's in the cost of their home that's built or the cost of the energy they use to heat their home.
Well, thank you for that answer, Collins. Thank you so much to our panel for sharing your expertise, for our builders, from our friends from Avista. Thank you for being here with us this morning. Thank you also for watching. Hopefully this made sense to you. Maybe you're there and you've tracked everything and you understand. Maybe this feels a bit overwhelming. I just want to leave you with a metaphor that I think can help explain really what we're talking about. And it's this: let's say you want to start going running. It's springtime is coming. You're going to go get in shape again. You decide, I need to go get some new running shoes. And so you go to the store and you tell the salesperson, hey, I've got $50. What kind of running shoes can I get? And they tell you, well, hey, we're sorry, we can't sell you a running shoe for $50 anymore. There's this law passed and there's this extra special foam that needs to go into all running shoes, and it's going to cost you $150. And you say, well, isn't there something that I can get? I only have the $50. And they go, sorry, that's the regulations that have been passed. We can't sell you anything lower than that. We can sell you higher than that, but we can't sell you anything less. And so what do? You end up leaving the store without any running shoes. And so you've got maybe your old lawn mowing shoes or some old Chuck Taylors that you're going to have to use to go running. That's really a good metaphor, we think, for what's happening here, is that this cost is being driven up, forcing people to pay for something that is a higher quality, is a higher cost, but the result is there are a whole lot of people who are going to be left without the opportunity to purchase a home. And that's really what we're concerned about. We value the choices that customers are able to make, and we also value home ownership and want to promote that, make that more attainable for more people. And really, when we drive up these costs, it means that people aren't going to be able to end up with a home.
Ever so true, Isaiah. And our panel has really brought out a lot of this information today. And as a senior citizen, if I can say that, we really are looking around too to be buying homes, just not the first-time homeowners. And we are being restricted by what we can look at, what we can't look at. So with this information that we have here today, again, we need to reevaluate, look at things, and identify, because I do enjoy the pleasure of walking in and hitting a button and the lights turn on and the fireplace goes on like Tom's does. But I enjoy that. And that's what I'm paying for. That's what I've worked hard for. So here in this area and on this subject, you need to get involved. You need to get to understand what is going on. It just doesn't affect the panel. It affects us all. And that's one of the items that I feel that we are doing here at House to Home, and we really are bringing it together. And I really hope that we can continue to answer more questions. This is a broad subject. So until next time, I'm Clyde Housey, Isaiah, and the wonderful panel that we had here today. Thank you for joining us. Look forward to seeing you again.
Thanks.